Hey everyone! So for the past couple months, I've been reading books on the Internet Archive, to be more specific, sewing and crochet books ranging from about 1890 to 1920, give or take. Now, the Internet Archive, archive.org, is a website where, among other things, they have digital versions of out-of-print books whose copyright has expired, making it a great resource if you're interested in reading old books, basically. The era that I like best, and of course want to read about, is the Edwardian era. However, there are much earlier books that are also available. To keep this intro kind of short, I'll talk a bit more about archive.org and all the wonderful things you can uncover there a bit later on, but the Cliff Notes version is that I found this 1913 book. It's called Practical Sewing and Dressmaking by Sara May Allington, linked below, and it has actual patterns that you could draft as well as instructions, which is kind of hard to come by. I didn't want to make a full dress, as the majority of the book is dedicated to making a dress and different variations of that, so I took our good friend Miss Allington's advice. The shirtwaist, combined with the 7 gored skirt, makes a fine shirtwaist suit. So, out of the different skirt patterns, I took the 7 gored version. And that brings us to about 3 months ago when I began drafting the skirt. So first I'd like to explain how this skirt fits together. Just to clear it up, a gored skirt is a skirt that's made of different panels that are sewn together to form the skirt, as opposed to, say, a circle skirt, which is basically a big circle of fabric with a hole cut in the center. Now, this particular skirt has a large inverted pleat in the back, which makes it have an odd number of gores, therefore making it 7 gored instead of 6 gored. This picture here isn't exactly the skirt I'm making, but it has a similar idea. As you can see, there's a front gore that's cut on the fold, and it lies on the center front of the skirt. Then there are 2 side gores on either side of it, and 2 back gores next to those, separated by the pleated piece in the back for a total of 7 gores. I was really confused about how the skirt went together for a long time, but I was more confused on the draft and how I was supposed to get the 7 gores out of it. Basically, the book instructed me to draft one large piece, and there were different lines on the piece that were supposed to signify how big each gore would be, based on how much of the big piece they took up. For example, the whole thing, cut on a fold, would make the inverted pleat in the back. The edge of the piece to the first line, cut on the fold, would make the front gore. Then the edge of the piece to the second line, cut double, would make the 2 front side pieces. The 2 gores then being mirror images of themselves when you cut them. Hopefully that made sense. That was the cumulative brain power of about a week of me thinking about this. Once you understand it, it seems super obvious. Then of course, there's the waistband and pockets and stuff, but that's pretty self-explanatory. So now let's move on to the mock-up. I made this mock-up out of random scraps I had, like this blue linen from the gathered skirt I made, and also some muslin that I had. Using 2 different fabrics probably isn't the smartest thing to do because of different weaves and stretches and all, but it turned out mostly fine. I cut out all my pieces, then I sewed the seams in the waistband and everything. You'll see me do it on the main skirt, so I didn't think it was worth filming. Then I could start working on the real thing. Here's all the pieces laid out. This pattern was drafted without seam allowances because I thought it would be more accurate to just add them on when cutting the fabric, rather than worrying about it with the tissue. What I'm pinning now is the front gore cut on the fold. Something the book told me to do is, quote, never lay the front side of the gores exactly on the straight of the goods lengthwise. Always lay the top of the gore back at least 1.5 inches. I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that you're not supposed to do that, but I trusted Miss Allington, and I don't know if she failed me or not because I have nothing to compare it to. Then I proceeded with cutting out everything, minus the pockets, waistband, and placket, because I wasn't exactly sure how those were going to work at this stage, and thought it would be better to wait. On my mock-up, the back pleat was a bit too large and extended into the closure between the back side and back gores, so what I did to remedy that was cutting the pleat without seam allowance on the sides. Turns out that wasn't enough, but I'll discuss that a little later on. Then I decided to thread mark lines where I needed to sew, which was kind of pointless because after I thread marked I did a fitting and decided I need to sew closer than where I had initially marked. I should have basted my seams together so that I would be sure where to sew and also make it easier to do fittings. And besides, I accidentally removed the thread marking before I was done with it, meaning I didn't have it when sewing the hem or the waistband on. And here's the front and side gores. Even though the thread marking was kind of useless, at least it looked satisfying when it was done. From there, I pinned all my seams so that they would be ready for sewing. So I pinned all these seams together and I just did a fitting, and it was a little large around the waistline, but that was just fixed by taking in about like a 1/4 inch on all the seams. That did happen with my mock-up too, but then in the end I took in too much and it ended up being too tight, so I hope that doesn't happen again. But another problem that happened in my mock-up was this back pleat was too large, and it's supposed to stop at this seam right here, and I'm planning on putting the closure in here, so it kind of has to stop there or it'll interfere with the placket, but it doesn't, it extends past. So I just took in a whole bunch, like this is how much I took in, like 1 inch on both sides to try and fix that problem. It's still kind of there, but I don't really know what else to do to fix it. I just thought getting rid of the seam allowance would be enough, but it isn't. So now I'm just going to stitch along all these seams. I'm going to do it by hand because I want to work on my hand sewing, and also I don't really trust my machine. I just have to remember to leave openings for the pockets and also for the placket. So I'm probably going to just stitch all the seams that don't involve any of that stuff and then decide on that later, because I haven't cut out the pocket pieces or the placket. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. Spoiler alert, I took it in too much, again. I could have fixed that by doing more fittings, but I was afraid my edges would fray too much and would be difficult to finish if I did that. Another thing that would have worked would be if I wasn't so stubborn and I used my machine, maybe the seams would be more accurate. I would still get a chance to hand sew when finishing the seams like I'd wanted, but I didn't choose to do that, and thus began the 2-month journey of sewing and finishing all the seams. To be fair, I was pretty busy with other things at the time, and this was the project that always got pushed to the back burner, even though it was the one I was most excited for. So yeah, sewing the seams took a long time that could be spent talking about my experiences reading old sewing books. So most sewing books only provide instructions on making specific garments, not the physical patterns to make them. This is because you were expected to go to a tailor and ask them for patterns, and then from there you could alter them forever as fashions changed or you needed to make them for other people, and these books taught you how to alter them and also how to make full garments. For example, if you had a plain sleeve pattern, the book would teach you how to make, say, an 1890 sleeve. Then they would teach you how to put the sleeve onto a dress that the book would also teach you how to make. So instructions for everything, yet no pattern. That makes these books a great resource to learn about how clothes were made, yet you wouldn't be able to make them yourself. However, on the other end, there are some books that give you only instructions for drafting patterns, not making them. A primary example being the Keystone Guide to Jacket and Dress Cutting. This book was from the 1890s and provided all sorts of patterns. It's kind of a dream of mine to one day be able to make one of his long coats, because I've always wanted a long coat, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that in a couple years. Just to illustrate my point, if I wanted to make a coat like that, I'd draft the pattern using his instructions, then I'd go to another book to find instructions on how to make it. Now, that's just what I would do because I'm clueless with this stuff. The author probably intended that you would just know what to do naturally. One last thing that really surprised me when I started reading these books is a lot of them are directed towards people who wanted to start their own dressmaking business. So there are whole sections at the end of the books on how to start your business, how to run it, and so on. And to close off this rambling thing, I'd like to share one of the most wholesome dedications I've read in any book. Madame Edith Marie Cairns, in her book, Dressmaking Self-Taught in 20 Complete Lessons, published in 1911, writes, "To all ambitious girls and women with a desire to improve their present conditions and make themselves independent and self-supporting, this little book is dedicated." Isn't that really nice? Anyway, back to the skirt. So the next thing I did after sewing all the seams was I removed the marking threads. I figured I could do the hem and waistband without them because they weren't as useful when sewing the seams. Next, I worked on finishing the edges of all the seams I just sewed. Unfortunately, I didn't film any of the actual sewing because I thought I did, although I really didn't. I only filmed myself trimming all the seam allowances so that the other side of the seam allowance could be folded over the raw edge and whip stitched down. This, besides sewing all the seams, was the other thing in the skirt that took a very long time. Next, I moved on to making the pockets. Practical Sewing and Dressmaking didn't have anything on pockets, so I looked to another book, Household Sewing with Home Dressmaking by Bertha Banner. I swear, all these books have exactly the same name. That's why I like referring to them by the author's name, because honestly, names are much easier to remember than century-old book titles. I can't tell you the exact measurements or instructions for the pockets because the Internet Archive is having a glitch right now, and every page with a picture on it is illegibly blurry, but what matters is that it's way larger than modern pockets, and it's wonderful. The pockets were basically bags, but with a diagonal chunk cut out of it to attach into the skirt. And I made them out of this muslin because Miss Banner brought it to my attention that black dye would have rubbed off onto the objects in the pocket, and so light-colored pockets with a black facing inside would have been made, and I felt like being historically accurate that day. Then I used my brand new, modern sewing machine I got as a gift to sloppily sew together the pockets. In the end, I probably shouldn't have gone with white pockets because all the seams created so much bulk, but at least they're huge and I could spread out my hand inside of them. It's amazing. Sewing in the pockets was a bit of a challenge, so I didn't film it, and I'm not completely happy with the job I did because, as I said, the pocket area is extremely bulky. Next, I worked on the placket, or the closure of the skirt. It involves two pieces, the placket and the facing. I'll explain how they work once I cut them out and they're pinned. So here on the right side is the facing. It lays on the inside of the skirt as a facing does. The placket here is sewn so that it extends past the edge of the fabric. When the skirt closes, the placket slides under the other side of the skirt and aligns with the facing. Hooks and eyes are sewn to these pieces so that they can close. This method of closure provides a very smooth joining of pieces. So then, I just sewed the pieces together in 2 rounds as shown. Then I marked out a placement for the hooks and eyes and sewed them on. The first time I did it, I sewed the hooks so that they came right up to the edge of the fabric, but then I realized that that would push the eyes further back, off the placket and onto the skirt fabric, so I had to resew all the hooks. Lastly came the waistband. It was just a 4-inch wide strip of fabric that was a decent bit longer than my waist that I pinned and sewed, then whip stitched to the other side of the skirt to form a waistband. I didn't film it, but I also trimmed off the excess so that it lined up with the placket, and sewed the hook and eye to that as well, like an extension to the placket. Looking back on it, I think it would have been more seamless to sew on the placket after the waistband and have it extend up to cover both the main part of the skirt and the waistband. Then I hemmed the bottom of the skirt, which turned out to be really difficult because the bottom edge of the skirt was wider than the point at which I was hemming it to. That totally did not occur to me, and that could have been fixed if I flattened out the last couple inches of the skirt when I was cutting it so that it wouldn't continue to sloping downwards. I didn't film it because I was struggling, but I ended up putting small pleats all along the bottom of the skirt to take in the excess fabric, which you can kind of see from the finished skirt. And with that, it was finally finished. I really love how it came out, however, there are a lot of things I could fix, and a lot of mistakes I made. I've gone over most of them already, but a big one I haven't touched on is that it's too tight at the waist. I had to move the hooks and eyes as far as I could, about 1 inch, and it's still pretty tight. It's not that uncomfortable, but after a while it may be. All of the mistakes I made could have probably been fixed if I took my mock-up a little more seriously, and also used my machine for more consistency and accuracy. For example, I didn't practice the pockets on my mock-up. However, I got off easy because the bulkiness of the pockets and them not wanting to sit right was mostly fixed with a good press. The openings are a bit small though. Some things I do like about the skirt though are how it looks pretty historically accurate silhouette-wise, even without the proper undergarments and petticoats, and how huge the pockets are. I'm probably going to make a shirtwaist to go along with this skirt, so feel free to subscribe for more fuzzy sock plushies, crochet tutorials, sewing videos, and whatever else I feel like doing. Also, another thing I wanted to mention is that I've started captioning my videos. I've gotten through most of them, though there are a couple more I still need to do, but from now on you can expect subtitles a day or two after I post a video. Thanks so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you guys next time!